The Conjuring movies are some of the most terrifying, popular paranormal movies ever to exist. All based on cases by Ed and Lorraine Warren. And that's what today's video is about. One in particular, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. We're here in Brooksfield, Connecticut today. More specifically, we decided to stop in Williams Park to kind of give you the front part of the story. Because we've already rode by the house where the Glatzels lived. It's kind of a bad road. It's really small, not much walking area on the side of it.
And a lot of traffic.
Yeah, a lot of heavy traffic. So we're trying to tell you a part of the story here before we take you over there to show you the actual house. In 1980, you had this house that we're going to show you in just a little bit. I mean, there was the Glatzel family lived there. There were 3 boys. The one that is significant to the story is David. He was the youngest of the boys. Now, also living there was Debbie, his older sister, and her boyfriend, Arne Johnson. Now, those 2 were planning on getting married and had just found an apartment or house. Like, it was a small house with an apartment attached to it in Newton, Connecticut. I couldn't find the address for that. But they had found that, and they were needing it cleaned before they could move in. So Debbie recruited her family, was like, yo, you guys come over here, help us clean the house so we can move in.
Family equals free help.
So the family piles into the car. They head over to this, new residence that Debbie and Arne are going to move into to help clean. Debbie tells David, go to the master bedroom and sweep it for me. Which is all good. You got your he's 11 at the time. You got your little 11-year-old brother helping clean. So he's up there sweeping and everything, and he reported that something pushed him onto the bed. Now, after this, he runs out of the house. He's terrified. He tells his mom, he's like, I just want to go home.
Naturally.
So the family gets back in the car. They go back home. That night, David ends up telling his family what happened to him in the bedroom. He said that something pushed him on the bed. It looked like a Halloween costume, like a devil's Halloween costume. The eyes were like black as coal. And it said it wanted his soul. Now, they really didn't think too much about it at the time. That night, David goes to sleep, and he gets the feeling that it's followed him. So he gets up, he goes to the window, and he sees it outside the house. Now, he's terrified. He stays awake all night. And, I mean, it's like a little while later, like a couple of days later, he wakes up screaming. He comes, the family rushes in, and it's at this point that they all stated that the house sounded like, almost like a UFO was like landing on the roof, like everything was shaking. Things were breaking, falling off the shelves. It was just a very terrifying experience. And David said, he's here. He's here.
I just want to know what experiences has this family had to know that it sounded like a UFO on top of the house?
I mean, you've seen movies. They've probably seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind. When did that come out? I mean, this is 1980. That was around the time.
Yeah, it probably close, but still, I mean, What kind of other experiences have you had to be able to say that? I mean, if our house shades would just say, I'm not going to say, man, it sounds like that's a daggum UFO on top of the house.
I mean, if something sounds like it's landing on the house, whatever.
I guess.
We've made it to Oak Grove Road. Now, this is where the Glatzel house stands today. Like we said, this is a very busy road, so I'm gonna try to do this quick without getting ran over. Now, obviously, once Arnie and Debbie found out what happened to David, they opted to not go ahead with the house they were planning on. But things continued to get worse with David. And the mom was very worried about him. She was wanting to get help for him. So she contacted the church, and they really wouldn't help at this time. So one of her neighbors was into like tarot reading, and she got her in touch with Ed and Lorraine Warren. So she calls them, and Ed is like, has he seen a doctor at this point? She said, no. Well, he said, I'm gonna visit. I'm gonna bring a doctor with me if it's okay. He said, sure. They arrive. The doctor checks David out, says, oh no, he's completely fine. So Ed is like, I can't really do anything without seeing it for myself. So I have to provoke this entity. So he tells it, he says, if you're that powerful, I need you to knock on the table 3 times.
We made it to the side of the house. Can't get the front because of all the trees. This is a busy, busy road for trucks. And this house is like right in a curve. Can I see the front of it a little bit?
I know that was a quick shot of the house. Literally, we fought for our lives for that shot for you.
Yeah.
That is a pet cemetery road.
Yep. There's so many dump trucks, box vans, and 18-wheelers coming down through there that you could get, and the house is in 2 curves and a freaking hill.
Yeah.
With like nothing to get out of the road unless you're on the other side of these 2 barricade things to keep you from going off in the gully.
Yeah, so there's literally no room to walk. Like,
Yeah.
you have to walk in the road unless you're walking through the leaves. And I hope you were able to hear me over all those crunchy leaves. So, like I said, Ed is like, has he seen a doctor? So she says no. So he says, okay, when we come to visit, I'm going to bring a doctor to check David out. So he does, and the doctor's like, David's fine. Everything's completely fine. And Ed says, okay, well, I kind of have to see and experience this myself. Like, basically, so they don't know he's lying. So he says, well, in order to do that, I have to provoke the entity. And so he's like, if you're that strong, I need you to knock on this table 3 times and show yourself. And while they're all waiting on it to happen, Lorraine is walking around the room. And all of a sudden, there's like 3 just like thunderous like knocks. And then Lorraine walks over to Ed and she whispers something in his ear. And it turns out that she saw like a huge black entity standing behind David. And she's like, this is a demon, a demonic entity. So he tells the family, he's like, you need to buy like a camera. We need recording devices. We need to document as much of this as possible to be able to take it to the church for them to come do an exorcism on David, because at this point he's possessed. But apparently there's a lot of paperwork that goes into getting a church to come perform an exorcism. I didn't realize that until I started researching this. I thought it was like, hey,
I need your help.
come do this. But it's like a whole thing. But so over the next couple of weeks, the family is taking shifts, sitting with David, and because basically they're scared he's going to hurt somebody. He's threatened to kill some of them. So they're documenting, like, when he would go into these things where he would start talking, like, not in his normal voice. They're taking pictures of things. Like, at one point they have a photo of him, like, where it looks like he's pulling something off, like trying to choke him. And eventually, the mom called Ed and Lorraine back. She's like, this has got to stop. So they get all their evidence they've compiled. They take it to the church. And it's at this point that the church is like, yes, we will help you. We will perform this exorcism. The church that actually told the Galitz family, hey, we'll help you, was actually here in Brookfield. It was the church you're seeing in front of you, which is St. Joseph's. Now, they arrive here with David. There's like a lot of priests here. His family comes. The Warrens are here. Arne Johnson is here. They inform the family, look, when we do these exorcisms, sometimes they don't end well. Sometimes they result in death. Like, it's a very hard process. So they proceed with the exorcism. At one point, David jumps up. He tries to attack, one of the priests. So they end up having to hold him down to the ground. Now, Arne Johnson is somewhere around the top of David's body, because at one point he does put a crucifix on his forehead, to which they reported started sizzling. And other people say that his body was contorting in ways that was not humanly possible. And towards the end, David's tongue started to swell, making it almost impossible for him to breathe. So they were like, we got to stop. We got to stop the exorcism. And it's at this point that Arne Johnson says, he's just a little boy. Leave him alone. Take me on. Take me on. And then it's at that point that it's almost like the exorcism is over. Everything with David has stopped. But Lorraine Warren looks at Arne Johnson and she's like, what have you done? You've basically invited this entity to attack you. You've opened the door for it to bother you at this point. And it's stated that she says regarding that these things do not attack immediately. They wait until you're at your most vulnerable. And that's exactly what this thing did to Arne Johnson. Here at the police station, after Arne Johnson basically invited the entity to take on him, Lorraine Warren actually stopped by this police department and reported that she had a vision of something happening to Arne, like a murder or him hurting someone or whatever. And they basically didn't listen to her. But it's stated that she came by here and tried to warn them before what Arne committed happened. A few months have gone by since the exorcism took place. Now, nothing's really happened to Arne during that time. And him and Debbie have found a place to live. She actually took a job at a dog groomer place and started working for a guy named Alan Bono. Now, her and Arne would move into an apartment at the same location, and Arne and Alan would become friends. So the building you're seeing in front of you that reads Martha's Vineyard Canine Resort, this is actually the location of where Debbie would have worked and they would have lived. Now, it's hard to see over the fence. I'm going to walk around here and try to get a better shot, but I think it's a 2-story building. I think the apartments were actually on the top floor, and then the dog grooming business was on the bottom. Now, on February 16th, 1981, Arne would go pick up his sisters for a visit. And they'd come back here, they'd have lunch with Alan, and they would go into one of the upstairs apartments and have some drinks. Now, once they started having so many, it's reported that Arne stated, Alan's getting belligerent. I don't really want my sisters around that. So he told Debbie, we need to go. And as at that point he was walking down the stairs that he said everything blacked out. He doesn't remember anything that happened after. But apparently him and Alan got into an argument which led into the front yard. And it was at that point that Arne Johnson stabbed Alan 4 times. Now, Debbie would call her family home because Arnie's cut out. He's left. And David picks up the phone. David reported getting a vision of a man lying with stab wounds, dying. And he said, Arnie's possessed. He's coming to kill me. Now, paramedics would arrive to pick up Alan. And when they're en route to the hospital, they actually see someone meeting Arne Johnson's description. So police were able to arrest him pretty quickly. I think it was like within an hour of this happening. Once he got to the police station, Arne was like, it's like he woke up. He said, what am I doing here? And the police officer was like, you just killed your friend. And he said, no, I didn't. And he said, yes, you did. And he reported that he literally had no memory of anything that had happened. We've made it to Danbury, which is a couple of miles away from Brookfield. This is actually where on October 28, 1981, the trial against Arne Johnson for the murder of Alan Bono would take place. Now, his defense attorney would enter a defense saying demonic possession. And with the help of the Warrens, he was going to use that, like saying, hey, David was possessed. They did this exorcism that jumped onto Arne. Arne doesn't remember anything. But ultimately, the judge would throw all of that out. And so the defense kind of scrambled at that point, like, we don't really know what to do. So they opted to do like a self-defense thing, and we're hoping for a manslaughter versus murder. And the jury would find Arne Johnson guilty of manslaughter and sentence him to 10 to 20 years in prison. There's a photo online, and Phyllis graciously decided to step in for Arne in the photo, but you can see him coming up these stairs, heading into this door here on the side of the building. In the photo, there is a handrail, but obviously that's missing. But what you can see in the background of the photo, if you look closely,
you can see
we're going to go down here to where this old fence post is.
You can actually see that light pole or power pole in the background also.
This right here. You can make that out behind him.
You can even see in the photo, you can even see the little sword looking thing on top, and you can see this part of the fence here.
There's also another photo that you can find online of the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine actually standing in this, it's almost like an alleyway, but it is like a little road, very rough road.
They would have been standing about right.
So they were about right here where he's at.
As you can see the steps are now missing, but where it angles down right here, you can see that in the background. And then there's a building that would have been across the street, but it looks like it's been torn down and a new one put there.
Another photo that you can find, and we'll put it here in the video for you to see, is actually right here in front of the building. You can barely make out the balcony and some of the building behind them, but it's Debbie talking with Ed and Lorraine right here. Even though Arne was sentenced to 10 to 20 years, he only did 5 years because he got out for good behavior. During the time while he was in prison, he would actually go on to marry Debbie, and the two of them would remain married until 2021, whenever Debbie passed away. After the trial, which was dubbed "The Devil Made Me Do It," was over, Ed and Lorraine would actually go on to hire a man by the name of Gerald Brittle to write a story telling what happened to David and Arne.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Gerald went on like doing his research, I guess collecting all the details of what transpired. And at some point along the way, Ed approached him and told him basically things to put in there and said, make it scary. And Gerald was like, well, this didn't happen. And Ed then said, well, people come to us. They buy scary. Make it scary.
That's one thing I've never understood with Ed and the other ones, because he did the same thing with A Haunting in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. Like, they got somebody to write a book, and the guy did his research, and he was like, I've talked to the family, I've talked to all these people. They all have said none of what you're telling me ever happened. But he turns around and still says, we'll make it scary anyway. I'm like, I just never understood that, because if you why not just put the things that happen, in there? Why ramp it up? I mean, I get it if you're trying to sell copies of books, or, like Hollywood to take based on a true story and add stuff to it, like the Poltergeist. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I don't get why add stuff in that never even happened. I mean, if you're doing a good job, then you shouldn't have to add stuff. You shouldn't have to fake stuff to get people drawn in. They should get drawn in just because of the actual events. I don't know. I just never understood it.
So let's talk about kind of the flip side, the people that didn't believe, like, the possession stuff. After the mom died, that was David's mom, the older son, I believe his name is Carl, he found letters that she had written, because she had like OCD where she would write everything that happened down. One particular letter that he found said that she had given all of her family sleeping medication. It was a good night. Now, the particular sleeping medicine that it said that she gave them did cause hallucinations. Mm. So that could have been where these things that the youngest David was seeing.
Right.
He also said that whenever Ed and Lorraine arrived, they talked about, well, he should be exhibiting this type of behavior in front of David.
So
like, almost kind of like...
putting it in his head.
Right.
Like, David's like, oh, well, if this is happening to me and they're saying I should be doing this, then now it's in his head. So he's more apt to say that it's happening now or start acting. Yeah.
Yes. So that's where, and then some of the people do not believe that whatever was in David jumped to Arne, because it was, I mean, there was a significant age gap between Debbie and Arne. Debbie was 26, Arne was 19. So there's a significant age gap. Alan Bono was 40. It was believed that Arne had a jealousy problem, like over Debbie, and it was speculations that she was having an affair with Alan Bono, and that the argument was over her.
Right. I mean, that could do it. And maybe he just got blacked out with rage, and that's what caught him. That's why he don't remember anything. You know.
I mean, it's still to this day, Arne Johnson claims, like, you know, what he said happens, like, that is still the same story he tells this day. It is not faltered. He said that he did not hurt anybody. He never would hurt anybody. I mean,
I don't know. Could be some truth to the story. I mean, you never know, really.
Yeah, you never really know.
Them demons is tricky. They tricksters. Do one thing, make you believe another thing, make everybody else believe something else. But that, I mean, if you think about it, that's how you stay hidden. That's how you get people to not believe in supernatural stuff, is by making the ones that do believe look crazy, or the ones that say they've been possessed or they've had this experience. You make them look crazy. You make them look like they're loony or whatever. Then people don't believe you. Then you can stay hidden and you can continue to do whatever. So, makes sense in a way if you think about it.
Well, it was a really interesting story, though.
Yeah. That does it for this conjuring tale, The Devil Made Me Do It. Let us know what you think. Was Arne actually possessed? Was he just blacked out with rage? Or maybe he was on some sleeping medication, mixing it with alcohol. Who knows? Let us know what you think. And until next time, before I forget, special shout out to our VIP Road Warrior patron, the Crypt Lady. Thanks for your sponsorship each month. And until next time, we'll catch you down the road at the next exit.
Keep it spooky.
Later.